Is there anybody in here from Galena? Oh, you are? We go over there and eat every once in a while, and with my brothers, we was over there one night, and I had this shirt on, and I told my brothers, I said, I sure hate to wear this shirt in Galena. It might make you prove it.
Everybody have a good day. Anybody lose any weight by sweating? Not in Revelation chapter 9. Revelation chapter 9. Verse 1, it says, "And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star falling from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit." Now, one thing that you need to recognize whenever we go from chapter 8 to chapter 9, the way that, of course, it wasn't chapter 8 and 9 whenever John was writing it, but when he's talking about, last week, he talked about the angels, what they were releasing, and that was affecting the earth. What we're starting to see now is that what they're doing and unleashing is affecting mankind. Okay, so it says here that this fifth angel sounded. Says, "And I saw a star falling from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit." Now in Scripture, in Revelation, what did it say that a star was? They said the stars were angels. You know, whenever it talks about the stars of the churches. So if the star was falling from heaven to the earth, who would that have been?
Be Satan.
Yep, be Satan. Let me read to you from the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 12. Now, listen to what Isaiah writes. He says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, how you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations, for you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will also sit on the mount of the congregation, on the farthest sides of the north, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High." So right here it talks about how you are fallen from heaven. So Isaiah was seeing in advance what John was seeing in Revelation. It's interesting, though, in verse 9, or chapter 9, verse 1 says, "Then the fifth angel sounded." So a lot of people think that this angel is also the same angel that appears in chapter, let me find it, happening here? In chapter 20, because Satan is loosed for what's about to happen. So in chapter 20, verse 1, it says, "And I saw an angel coming down from heaven." So a lot of people think that this is the same angel that looses everything earlier in the book. He goes, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. It says, "And he laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So this angel here apparently has the power to come down and set things in motion. And whenever God says it's time, this same angel will come back, and he has a chain, and he binds Satan for 1,000 years. So a lot of people have mistook, saying that the angel that was fallen, the star that fell, was this angel. Well, Satan's not going to bind himself. He's not going to do that. So this one angel it talks about in chapter 9, verse 1 at the very beginning, he's the same one, I believe, that we see in chapter 20, specifically for this purpose. How many know that God has a purpose for everybody? He just does, doesn't he? He has a purpose, he has a time. So that's what we're looking at there. So we're looking at Satan fallen. Chapter 9 says, "And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit." It's almost like, you see those signs on the road, "Don't drive into smoke." It's a bad thing. How many like it? Whenever smoke is out, that's one thing, in our tribe, whenever you get cleansed and you go for ceremonies and things like that, you get the smoke, the cedar smoke. That's a great smell. But the smell of people when they're burning leaves, like they're burning grass clippings, or like we had, those gum trees, we would take those out there and we burned those on our property. And the thing that I never liked was that smoke would get everywhere. I would make sure that my windows were rolled up in my car, and my vents were turned off, and the doors were closed, because that smoke would get in and you couldn't escape it. See, imagine what it's like, this smoke here. It said the sun is darkened, the smoke rises, so it's everywhere. This smoke is every place, and you have to understand that first century Christians, the way they looked at the world, it was 3 tiers to everything. There was heaven above, there was the earth, and then there was hell below. So it's like there were 3 layers, the way that they saw everything around them. The highest level that we can attain to is heaven, so that's the top. Right there. Well, then we were in the middle, and so underneath of us is where hell was at. Kenzie even talked to me about this the other night. She goes, "Dad, do you believe that?" I said, "Well, I know that we have a core to our earth, and all this magma and everything down there." And I said, "A lot of people believe that it's there." And I said, "Whether it is or not," I said, "I sure don't want to find out exactly where that's at." So I talked to her about the rich man and Lazarus, and said that, Lazarus went to Abraham's bosom. It was a holding place because Christ hadn't come and been crucified yet. But it says that the rich man was in torment in hell. I said it was a very real place. And I said, in the way that that's written down in that parable, it's not really a parable because it actually has a name where he names somebody. Okay? The story that Jesus tells, and that's a reality for the man that was the rich man. That was his reality, that he was in hell and he was in torment. So imagine that everything is opening up. Everything is opening up. And it says in verse 3, it says, "Then out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power." Now what's a locust? Grasshopper. Now remember we talked last week about how whenever these trumpets were blown and the bowls are opened and all these different things you read in Revelation, the similarity to what Moses was able to command in the Exodus whenever they came out of Egypt. Let me read a verse to you from Exodus chapter 10. The 8th plague, when Moses was looking to bring his people out, was the 8th plague was locust. So it says in Exodus chapter 10, he's talking to Pharaoh. He says in verse 4, he goes, "Or else if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory." It says, "And they shall cover the face of the earth so that no one will be able to see the earth. They shall eat the residue of what is left, which remains to you from the hail. They shall eat every tree which grows up for you out of your field." So this would be like smoke, wouldn't it? I mean, he was going to release them. God was going to do that, and it was going to destroy everything that was left from the hail and the other plagues that had come upon Egypt. So it says in verse 6, says, "They shall fill your houses, the houses of all your servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen since the day that they were on the earth until this day." He goes, there are going to be so many of them. He goes, it's never been recorded the amount that you will see. he goes, they will cover everything. He goes, they will come in through the cracks of the wall. He goes, they will come in when you open the door, and like a flood. He goes, they will be on your countertops. He says, they will be in your food. They will be wherever you try to clean yourself off at. He goes, they will be where your animals are at. He goes, they will cover everything like smoke. He says over here, verse 14, it says, and the locusts went up over all the land of Egypt and rested on all the territory of Egypt. They were very severe. Previously there had been no such locusts as they, nor shall there be such after them. So this was a tremendous plague. And see, Egypt at that time, that was like the breadbasket. Remember when Joseph went there, and Joseph had his dream, and they stockpiled all the grain. They had everything ready for people that were going to be starving outside the kingdom, and they brought them in. So Egypt had all this grain and these fields and everything else, and locusts destroyed everything. Ate it all up. But see, what you'll notice here, it says in the smoke, out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power to sting. Now, does that make sense? See, what we're seeing here is something that is 100% supernatural. This is the hand of God. You know, you see things like that, like when there's a tornado comes through, they said that was an act of God, the hand of God. When these disasters come up, everything that has been to this point will pale in comparison. It just will. I mean, this is tremendous what is happening on the face of the earth. It says in verse 4, it says, they were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. So what's fishy about that? See,
Are you talking about the 666?
no, what's fishy about these locusts, what they're doing.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
They normally eat vegetation.
And see, they're told not to harm any grass or green thing. Okay? And he says in that verse right there, he goes, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their forehead. Now, if you remember just a couple of chapters ago, in Revelation chapter 7, he says, the four angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God on their foreheads. So these locusts supernaturally are commanded to not harm, you know, those who are sealed by God on the forehead. You know, so you're looking at these things right here. He says to harm those who do not have the seal, that was what I meant to say. Those that don't belong to God. They were commanded to harm them. It says in verse 5, it says, and they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. How many's ever been stung by a scorpion? Is it pleasant? Hurts.
My legs, they're like on fire.
Like on fire.
Swelled up horribly.
Yeah.
Struck me on the foot, my whole leg swelled up. That can grow up at home, we have scorpions here, people.
Mm-hmm.
I killed one this morning in my garage.
Did you really? Very big? Big enough to hurt. I know Mike mentioned Galena, Kansas, when I youth pastor over there. We were, you know, that big church is on the edge of town. That's where I youth pastored at. And the old sanctuary, all the venting that went down, it's like you could pull the vent off and all you saw was gravel. You saw gravel underneath the church. And so they were always battling scorpions coming up. I would go to the office in the morning and I would go to the door and I would step on them by the front door. I mean, that's how thick they were. And we had guys in the nursery that had been stung by them, and they kept an eye on the kids because scorpions would come up through the vents. I mean, they were every place. You know, it says right here in that verse, it says they were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. So these locusts aren't what's ever been seen before. It says they were given authority to torment. It says not to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. So the average lifespan of a locust is from spring through summer. So their whole entire reason for being is to torment man. What I like about that verse, what I really don't like, it says in verse 6, the next one says, in those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. That's a pretty strong statement right there. It says that guys will be, and do you think this is just men? It's women too, isn't it? It's women as well. You know, a lot of times in Scripture, they would, like the feeding of the 5,000, they were talking about 5,000 men because that's how they wrote. But think of all the women that were there too, and children. So you think about this here, and it's not just men that are being tormented, it's women, it's those who have chosen not to follow God, to follow His Son, Jesus Christ. So it says that they're tormented, it says, and they want to die, but they can't. So it almost makes you think that there's no way to even commit suicide. What a horrible feeling that would be, to be in such torment that you would rather be dead, but you can't die. I wanted to read this quote to you that I found. I thought it was very interesting.
Now, Jeff, those that had the seal of God, was that the 144,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I've got another question,
Yeah.
and we may not have an answer. What about children that aren't of the age of accountability? Are they, they're not sealed by God, but they're also...
I would think that they would be protected. I mean, that's my opinion, that they would be protected. Because they're born into something that they don't understand and they don't know right from wrong. You know, and I can't see God turning a locust that has a sting like a scorpion that torments for 5 months on children. And plus, you know, people will say too that when the rapture of the church happens, you talk about children being the age of accountability, and a lot of people say that is what age? A lot of people say it's 12. You know, because Jesus was visiting with the doctors, you know, whenever they left him, and he's I must be about my Father's business. A lot of people say the age of accountability is 12. And I can see that, but what if you've been raised in church and that's all that you've known, and so you're more familiar with right and wrong at an earlier age? You know, I think my daughters, you know, they both perceive things differently, but I think that their age of accountability, I believe it would come earlier than 12. You know, because Emily?
It's very difficult to ascertain. I mean,
Very.
God would know
Yeah.
the age of accountability
Yeah.
for someone.
But, you know, you would think the children would be gone. Innocence would be gone if the church had been raptured. I mean, that's what makes the most sense to me.
But people are still going to be giving birth and...
Yeah. Life will still carry on, you know. They were married and given in marriage like it says it was in the days of Noah. But my opinion is that they would be innocent, and I just don't think that that would happen to them. I mean, that's me, and I could be wrong, but that's kind of the way I've always thought about that. Anybody else have a thought on that or a comment?
Well, now thought on it, and this is not one way or the other, but, you know, when the death plague went through Egypt, firstborn,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, there's all different
Yeah.
ways to look at it.
But
It didn't
these-
matter the age, the firstborn.
But these creatures have a command not to harm those that are sealed by God, which is a specific group. But then again, if you're under the age of accountability, how could you...
Or if you haven't reached that age yet where you're, you know, you might be a little bit older than the kid next to you, but you're still not able to comprehend between right and wrong, you know, that age of accountability. So, yeah, that's a tricky question. And, you know, when John was seeing that, he left some specifics out.
You don't want to be around to find out.
Yeah, exactly right.
So unfortunately today, kids aren't spared torture and
Yeah.
horrendous things that happen.
Yeah, because you read it, I mean, you can't pick up the Tulsa World without saying something horrible happening to families in this area. And even in the Miami area, what was the thing that was on Facebook the other day, those kids in Bonita, you know, that were burned so severely when they took them out for an outing. And they closed the daycare down. I mean, that was horrible. And those were little kids, and they suffered. That's just one of those things. It's hard to understand how everything works the way that it does. Anybody else have a comment on that or a thought? I wanted to read this quote to you. This is a guy that was a Roman poet in 1 BC. His name was Cornelius Gallus. He says, "Worse than any wound is the wish to die and yet not be able to do so." That makes sense, doesn't it? You know, that's where these people are at right here. In verse 6, it says, "In those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will desire to die, and death will flee from them. The shape of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. Their heads were crowned. On their heads were crowns of something like gold, and their face was like the faces of men." So I was reading different commentaries, and people said that with them having a crown of gold, which I've seen guys try to draw what this would look like, and it's kind of freaky looking. You know, so you've got a locust, you've got a scorpion, a locust body, you've got a scorpion's tail, and it says there's these little bitty tiny heads. It says they have a crown, which means that they're about to accomplish something. It says they have the faces of men. So what people think that means is that there's an intelligence there, there's a cunning that's there, okay? That there's something that's supernatural that sets them apart from anything that's ever been before. It says, and they had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. Now, I like this because I have long hair, as you might have noticed that, maybe not, but Parthians, which they were a scourge to Rome for a long time, it says that Parthian warriors wore their hair long, specifically for battle to look more fierce, kind of like Pawpaws do. And it says that they would wear their hair like that because it says that it would just flow behind them when they marched into battle. And it says that so some cultures, their warriors would be like that. So it says right there, they had hair like women's hair. So what he was seeing something that Roman people would understand because they had dealt with that. They had dealt with the Parthian army that had defeated 2 Caesars. You know, they were later defeated themselves, but, you know, they were very fierce warriors. And they said that they were able, when they were in chariots, to shoot to the front and to the back. And it says if they were fleeing, if they were pushed back, said that they had a way where they would shoot over their heads or to the back of them, and their arrows would be laced with poison, so that if you were hit, it was horrible, you know, the pain that you would be in because of the poison that was laced on the arrows. So it says that they were very fierce. So John is describing something that the population in Rome would surely understand. It says, and they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. They had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men for 5 months. Now, let me read this verse to you from Proverbs. Proverbs 30, verse 27 says, the locusts have no king, yet they advance in ranks. So he's talking about locusts that we understand locusts to be. And if you've seen them, you've seen videos of them destroying fields. It's just like a blanket that comes over when there's like a swarm of them. And it's like a blanket that comes in, and it doesn't look like there's any leader. They're all for the same purpose. So they just move forward and advance like an army, and they destroy everything that's in their path. So he's saying right here, the writer of Proverbs he goes, the locusts, they don't have a king, says, yet they advance in ranks. So that's a natural locust. Now look at the difference, what it says right here. It says in verse 11, it says, and they had as king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Greek is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name Apollyon. So these locusts actually have a leader, a general, that pushes them where they need to go. Now, what does Abaddon and Apollyon mean? Now, Abaddon means destruction, and Apollyon means destroyer. So it's basically the same thing. It's just a different word depending on what translation or language you're looking at. So these locusts are supernatural, and they have a leader, a general, that guides them on. That's what his purpose is. And it says, and one woe is past, behold, still 2 more woes are coming after these. That's pretty bad. Pretty bad. Can't you imagine what it would be like to be left here and dealing with that? I mean, it's not bad enough with what? Our heat index is 110, and grass will be burning off here pretty soon, and water doesn't get cold enough, and air conditioning breaks down. And, you know, we go through all these hardships now. Imagine what this will be like. I mean, this will be like nothing that has ever been in history before. It says in verse 13, it says, then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard the voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So if this voice is coming from the altar, whose voice would that be? This voice is coming from the altar where the horns are and everything. It would be the voice of God saying, release these angels. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense, because God's voice would bellow, would burst forth from the altar. I mean, probably like lightning and thunder, this huge crack of a voice. And it says here, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now, does the Euphrates still exist today? Now, what were the 4 rivers that it talked about, which I don't remember all of them all the time, in Genesis? When everything started in the garden, there was the Euphrates, there was the Tigris, and there was the, how do you pronounce it? The Pishon, and the Hiddekel, however you say that word. Well, we still hear about the Euphrates today, don't we? See, in Israel's greatest time, during the time of Joshua, when they took the promised land, and all the way up into 2 Samuel when David was king, the Euphrates was still the boundary, the northeasternmost boundary between Israel and their enemies. So if you held the Euphrates, if you controlled that, then you controlled your enemies. But if they were able to ford the river, they were able to come across, and that meant it was a tremendous force that was coming to do battle. So he's got these 4 angels, and these aren't good angels, okay? These are angels that have been bound. And it says to release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the 4 angels who have been prepared for the hour and the day and the month and the year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. So these angels, they're bad guys. These are some of the worst, and they have been bound through history until this very moment, and they're released to kill 1/3 of mankind. Now, it's interesting because the way that this is phrased in Revelation, the hour, the day, the month, the year, that's the only time this phrasing is used in the New Testament, where they say they're prepared, and it's very specific. So whenever God says it's time for them to be released, God has set this in motion before man was even on the face of the earth. God has set this in motion for an hour, a day, a month, and a year. So you could say like at 7 o'clock on the 23rd day of July, 2066. I mean, that time is exactly like that. And the only time, so God is very specific in his timing. You know, it works like that for us, doesn't it? God's very specific. His timing is always perfect. I mean, you've heard people say that whenever you come to the Lord. Well, it was your time. This was your day. You know, I can say that about myself. That there was a specific time for me to get everything right with God that day that I was in the grocery store. And that lady came in, and you guys have heard my testimony, where she says, if the Lord was to come back today, are you ready? No, I'm not. She goes, would you like to be ready? I said, yes, I would. She goes, let's pray. That day, that hour, that time, that place, that was for me, that was God's perfect timing. And you guys have got stories the same way, where there was a specific time whenever you just knew that it was time to turn that corner and to be right with God, to get everything to where you needed to be. It doesn't mean that your life was perfect. It doesn't mean that you weren't going to have any more problems or any more bills to pay. It just meant that that was your time spiritually to get where you needed to be. So see, God is specific with demons too. These angels have been bound since they fell from heaven, since they were cast out by Michael in that great battle in the heavens. They were cast out of heaven, and these specific 4 have been bound all that time for this hour. And they're released to kill 1/3 of mankind. How many people is that? How many? How much more can the earth hold? How many more people can live here on this rock? What is it, over 7 billion and counting? Right now. Right now. So what's 1/3 of that? If they're to kill 1/3 of the people on the face of the earth. That's a bunch. That's a bunch. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Kind of freaky stuff, isn't it? It says in verse 17, it says, and thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow, and the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and brimstone. What do you think brimstone is like?
Hotter than hot. The
Hotter than
hottest,
hot.
the absolute hottest.
That sulfur and everything mixed together. How hard would it be to breathe with that in the air? It's hard enough with regular smoke, isn't it? Man, sometimes it's hard enough just to breathe with the mushroom plant down here. When you open your door, your garage, it just slaps you in the face. You think, my goodness, I'm going back inside. That's nasty. Just imagine if everything was covered with that. Fire and smoke and brimstone. That is what is flooding everything. It says in verse 18, it says, by these 3 plagues 1/3 of mankind was killed, and the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths, for their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails are like serpents having heads, and with them they do harm. Now, it's interesting what some people have speculated, because it talks about them being released from the river Euphrates. And how many of you guys have heard prophecy teachers and read books and heard guys preach on the fact that the Euphrates, this is the armies from the east coming in? You know, people have talked about that. It's not time for that yet. I forget how many years ago, I think I probably missed a verse there. Verse 16, listen to what it says here. It says, now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million, and I heard the number of them. So that's the verse that's right before the horses. And I wanted you to think about this. This is the largest specific number in Scripture. 200 million, okay? That's a lot. That's a big number. You know, a couple of chapters ago, we had 144,000. That's a big number. You know, when he talked earlier in Revelation about hearing those worshiping 1,000 times 1,000 times 10,000, or whatever that number that John used, here he says 200 million. So because of that number, some people think that he's talking about the armies of the east. Well, this is supernatural. This isn't natural like man can do. I remember when they used to have those comic books all the time? Chick Publications put those Christian comic books out, talking about the rapture of the church and different things. Man, I thought those were the coolest things in the world. And I remember that one of them, they would have all these facts in them, and it talked about, and it seemed like it might have been in the 70s or maybe into the early 80s. They said at that time, China could muster a standing army of so many 100 million strong. That if China decided to say, we're going to form an army and we're going to march over here, we're going to take it over, that they could do that in what would seem like a heartbeat, and they would be ready for battle and they would march. Well, that doesn't happen here, because this isn't natural. This is supernatural, okay? Now, let me read to you when that does happen, which we'll be getting to it too, but if I can find my spot here. In Revelation chapter 16, verse 12, it says, "And the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up." See, in this here, what we're talking about tonight, the water is not dried up. The angels are just released. So it says, "And the water was dried up so that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared." So a little bit later, that's what happens. The Euphrates is dried up. And so that provides a way for the kings of the east, which would be who? China. China and who else? All those Asian countries that would fall in line with China, because China is a superpower. And China grows stronger every day. You look at what they're doing now. They're setting up, making islands because they want to expand their military base. There was just a thing in the paper last week where we have a commander that commands our naval forces out in that area, and said he's doing flyovers and doing practice runs and missions, and he said that he goes, that is not land. They're building barriers. They're places where there are atolls and things like that. They're building those up, bringing in sand and gravel and making little strips and saying that is the boundary of our property. That is the edge of our stuff. So if you fly over this or if you come this way in a boat, that is not international waters anymore. That is ours. So this commander of our forces in that area, that region of the world, he says, well, I don't recognize that. So he was still doing flyovers and practice runs because he goes, we don't recognize that because it's not a natural island. They're making that themselves. See, China, even at this moment, they're working on expanding their military might. China's a lot bigger than we are. There's a lot of people there. A lot of people there. Even when they were having the whole one child per family thing, there's still a bunch of people in China. And they probably own us as far as monetarily. I mean, how much money do we owe to China in Japan? I mean, we owe them a lot of money. If they ever decided to call us on what we owed them, it'd be a bad deal. It just would be a bad deal. So in Revelation chapter 16, when it talks about the Euphrates drying up to prepare for the kings of the east, that is what that's for, but this is not yet. This is still supernatural. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Verse 20 says, "But the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murderers, or their sorceries, or their sexual immorality, or their thefts." Isn't man a funny creature? We can be faced with truth for years and just ignore it. Say, well, I'm not going to go that way because I don't want to do that right now. We can be faced with different things that are so severe that would make you think, well, I'm turning to God. I'm going to get my, but we don't. See, even with all this happening, those that were still left were still stubborn enough to say, I refuse to change from the way I'm living now. I refuse. It says they didn't repent of their murders or their idolatry or their sexual immorality. It says they continued to do those things. Because see, even with all this going on, this is still God giving an opportunity to repent. That's why I've never understood, and you guys have heard this too, where people have said, you know, well, I'll serve God after the rapture happens. When I see it, I'll believe it, and then I'll serve it. Then I'll serve it. How difficult will it be to serve God at that point if you can't serve Him now? when we don't have all these supernatural things going on, there's not all this thing that's coming upon the earth like John is talking about in Revelation that is working its way to our time. So if we have trouble serving him now, how difficult will it be when all this is happening on the face of the earth? How difficult will that be? I just don't think that you can. I don't. I mean, it'll be every man for himself, kind of like The Walking Dead. You guys seen that show? I think that's one of the greatest shows ever. I think, how would I survive in a zombie apocalypse? I've got my stuff in my garage now, the things that, one in this hand, one in this hand. We're ready. Let's bring it on. What do you need to do to survive? So, but that's fantasy. And a lot of people think that this is fantasy. But how many things in the Bible have been proven true? All the time they look for things. They're always finding something in archaeological digs that backs up things that you've read in Scripture. Where they found sites where this took place. They found scrolls. They found all these different inscriptions, and everything points back to here. It points back to truth. So if those things have come to pass, you know, when David really lived, they found the, you know, what's supposed to be Noah's Ark on Ararat. They found all these things. So if those things have come to pass and those have been true, then why wouldn't this take place as well? This is the culmination of what we study and put our faith in right here. All I can say is that it's better to serve God now. Amen. It's a good thing. Amen? Anybody have any questions on what we talked about tonight? Pretty rough stuff. And like I said, I'm not an expert on it. I just do a lot of reading, do a lot of praying, just try to tie things together and try to be as practical as I can. But it's very interesting. It just is. And I think it's something that we need to be reminded of. It's something for us to hear. It kind of puts everything in proportion, doesn't it? Kind of brings balance, I think. Because we see this and then we can tie it into that, and we see God's hand in everything, in the preparation and the way that he pulls things through. And I'm glad that you guys are here. I'm glad that you're here, that we get to discuss these things. And does anybody have anything that they want to add or any comments they want to share?
You know, Jeff, it says in Romans, I believe it's the 14th chapter, along in there somewhere, about it's written that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is the Lord. This is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard-hearted and stubborn can humans be? How can mankind deny? It's going to take all of this. You know, and some people, even to the very end, they're going to fight against God to the end, but they will stand before God and confess that Christ is his Son.
And that's one thing those chick comic books will always have. And about every other one that I'd read that showed people standing before God, and then you see him back saying, well, Lord, I'm ready to serve you now. And he says, well, the time for that's passed. Because you've already stepped through the veil, or you've crossed the river. However you want to say it, you've already moved from here to there. You've moved from the spirit or the physical into the spiritual. You know, this is eternity. And this, when you were on the physical side, that was the time to decide. You know, we all make mistakes as believers. All of us do. I mean, I'm far from perfect. I am. And all of us are the same way, but we're all trying our best to be what we're supposed to be. We're all on a different path, and we're all working our way to where God wants us to be in. That's the best that we can do. You know, I think that's, you know, all that God asks of us is to do the best that we can. You know, make the most of your life of where you're at right now. Right now. Decide that you're going to live for him and do everything you can to make a difference. I mean, that's all I try to do every day, is to make a difference in somebody's life somewhere during the course of the day. You know, just to be able to be an influence, to be positive, and you know, to be able to share the love of Christ. And make the most of this day right here. I know when we lived in Springfield, we went to James River for a little bit. And, John Lindell is a great pastor. He's in that church of, what, 9,000 probably by now, and have 2 campuses. And he's a great preacher. He just is. He said that that's one thing that people they would always ask him, say, well, you know, you talk about Revelation, talk about suffering. What about suffering over here? And if God's really real, then why does this happen? Why does it happen over there? How come the kids are hungry here? And he goes, you know what? He goes, I don't have an answer for all those things. He goes, but all I can say to you is, what about where you're at right now? What about the knowledge that you have about the Savior? You know, is it going to be yay or nay? And really, that's what it boils down to, because there's not a preacher that's going to have the answers to everything that goes on in the world that's bad. We're just not. all I can do is share with you the best that I can with what God puts in my spirit, and He wants me to share with you. And all I can do is the best that I can do, and that's all that any of us can do every day that we're here, is the best that we can for God. You know, sometimes He's going to tell us right away, well, this is why. Other times, He might wait just a little bit and say, well, remember a couple of months ago when you asked me about this, He goes, well, this is why this happens. And sometimes it still might not come for a little bit. But we follow, don't we? We follow. I'm glad that God loves us. Man. I'm so glad that He sent His Son to die for us. Amen. Regardless, that was what I was saying at a service I was doing today. You know, I was talking about treasure. Because this fella was a guy that went to buy storage units and auctions and things like that. And, you know, the Bible says we have this treasure in earthen vessels, and that's us. And I told him, I said, you know, the only thing that's worthwhile in me, the only treasure that you'll find is what's inside of me. I said, that's Christ. Because that's what gives me hope, and that's what gives me faith. That's what gives me compassion, helps me to act in grace and mercy, is the treasure that's inside of me. And I said, that's Jesus. That's Jesus. And I said, you'll find treasure in the weirdest places. I said, this fellow would look for it in a storage unit, and I said he would never know what, but he would be expecting to find something. Amen. I said, you know, even in a place like this, in a funeral, I said, you can find treasure. I said, it's Jesus. I said, you never know where you'll find it. You just don't. He's always looking for us, isn't he? I mean, if you guys will, I was going to have you stand with me. We'll go over our prayers real quick. A prayer request. I know that Mary's surgery yesterday went well. So we'll pray for her recovery on that.
I talked to her today about noon, and she was still expecting to come home. Have you heard anything since then?
No.
She texted me and said that she was getting out.
She was? Or
Yeah, she was. That's the last I heard from her too.
she was expecting to go soon, and they hadn't been in yet, so that's just hospitals for you. But
Yeah, she said, I'm checking out of the hospital now.
good.
So,
Remember Rhea in prayer, and Kim and I went and saw Georgie on Monday. It's just a rough time. It's hard to be able to do whatever you want to do, and then all of a sudden everybody's making decisions for you. That's a tough thing. You know, Miss Georgia, she can be a spitfire when she wants to be. She just can.
giving it back to him.
Giving it back to him, she is. So just pray for her. Pray for her. It was funny because Brenda was talking to us and said that the doctor came in and says, I need you to move the therapist came in or whatever he was, and said, I need you to move your right leg down here. And said she just kept looking at him, and she reached up with her left leg, grabbed a hold of it, pulled it down. And he said that she cheated. And he said, you did move it, but you're not supposed to do it that way. So she just kind of looked at him. So just pray for her and Fred. Pray for her and Fred. Fred said his granddaughter's killing him. Putting him through the paces on therapy and things like that too. So we had a good visit with him. It was a lot of fun to talk to him and visit, pray with him and everything. And I told him how much everybody here was praying for him as well. Anybody else have a request this evening? Remember Gary's family?
Karen was wondering about Bill. He's not got good reports this week. It's just real rough. He's probably the worst case of COPD the specialist has seen for a while. So
guy I worked with, his fiance's mom passed away last night. She was 55 and she had cancer all through her body. He asked that we pray for his fiance and everything. Her first name is Emma. I don't know what her maiden name is. His last name is Jenkins, so if you want to put Jenkins on there, you can.
And she passed away last night?
The mom did, yes.
The mom did,
Yes.
okay.
She was in St. Louis. They got to go see her, I think Sunday, whenever she was, they needed someone to sign for a power of attorney, and they went to see her at least. But then she went rapidly down the last couple of days, and she passed away last night. So.
Remember my family, my Aunt Martha passed away Monday, and her services tomorrow at the tribal grounds.
I have kind of an unspoken request in that I can't say the name, but they did request prayer. Lady had a heart attack and had the stents put in was recovering well when they realized that she was losing blood. And because of the heart attack and the blood thinners, it actually alerted them to the fact that she has a terrible ulcer that is inoperable. And they're kind of stuck between not knowing whether to keep her on the blood thinners to keep her from having another heart attack, or to take her off the blood thinners so she doesn't bleed out. I think they've chosen to try to fix the ulcer as much as they can with lots of medicines and tone down the blood thinners, but I think this next 6 weeks is what they said is probably gonna tell the tale whether she makes it through or she doesn't.
Remember Jamie's dad, Jack? Pray that he just continues to strengthen up for that last little go-around that he needs to do.
We went over and saw Reed Monday. Monday. She's doing real good. She talked, visited, acted like she felt pretty good. So we told her we'd just keep praying for her. She's just doing a lot better this time than what she did the last time.
Yeah. That's
Throat was
good.
scratchy, but nothing like what she had had before the first treatment, so that was good news.
Yes.
Tom's been having a few chest pains the last couple hours, so I was thinking we used wisdom.
Any other prayer requests? Okay, just remember, pray for Mary, you know, for her complete healing with all she's going through. Pray for Reed. I know that this go-around is a little bit better for her. I know when Billy and I saw her last week when she had the treatment, she was in great spirits. She really was. And remember George and Fred. She goes to her therapy. Remember Brother Gary's family. Tough day today. Been a tough couple of days, several days. And remember them. Remember Brother Bill. I know he'd much rather be here, but it's hard on him right now. Remember Emma Jenkins' mom who passed away. Remember my family, my Aunt Martha. Her service is tomorrow. This lady that with the heart attack and discovered the ulcer, let's remember her in prayer. Remember Jack. He's just got to get a little bit strengthened up, and they can do that last little go around on his heart, and everything could be good. It was good to see him in church Sunday.
It was.
It was very good. And remember Tom. Been fighting some chest pains. And, would anybody like to volunteer to lead us in prayer this evening? Okay, Casey, you will. Take us to the Lord in prayer, if you would, please.
Eternal Father, come to you tonight, Lord, with all of these that have been mentioned in our hearts, Lord. We ask that you be with each and every one, touch them in a special way, Lord. We know that you have the power of healing. We know that you can take care of them, Lord. We just ask that you will. Lord, we ask that you go this rest of this week with Jeff and Kim, Lord, that they're getting ready to go on a long trip. We ask that you take care of them during that time, Lord. Bring them back to us. Go with us, Lord, as we leave here tonight, and keep everyone to return at the appointed hour, Lord. These things we pray in Christ's name.
Amen. And Kim and I can't tell you enough, which we had a card at the house, and she asked me if I brought it. Of course, I forgot. But we can't thank you all enough for the offering. It was just overwhelming. And thank you guys so much, and for taking care of us and for loving us. I mean, that just means an awful lot. And we were talking to Emily about it. Emily was blown away. And I said, we're going to buy something for the kids when we get there. She goes, well, Dad, they have a lot of toys. I said, well, we'll get something for them. I said, the church took care of us. And she goes, well, we can maybe do like a field trip day one time where we can all kind of go out and we can all take the kids to eat. I said, yeah, we'll do that, and we'll buy them something. You know, it's always good to be the guy that brings toys. So they already call us Grandma and Grandpa, so we're looking forward to meeting them. So thank you guys so much. It just means the world to us, and we'll get that card over here. And I know Dan's going to do a great job. He's going to do a great job, and I know God's put them here, and this is part of God's plan. It's part of God's plan. He's got messages lined up to get you guys ready for revival. We're going to be praying over there. Does anybody in here have a smartphone? How many people have a smartphone? If you will go into your applications and get the WhatsApp application, we'll be able to communicate back and forth. It's called WhatsApp, and we can show you here in a minute. It looks like a little green balloon with, does it have like a?
It's got like a caption
bubble with a phone on the inside.
And it's a little green icon. But if you have the WhatsApp, if we're in a place where we have Wi-Fi, then we can talk back and forth. It's like we're texting here in Miami. And that's how we communicate with Emily. So if you've got that, we'll be able to kind of keep up with everything here and back and forth.
Well, just remember to be safe and come back to us, because we really kind of like you.
Well, our plan is to come back. Now, Kenzie had asked me, she goes, Dad, now when we're there, she goes, can I stay over a little bit longer with him? I said, no, you have a return ticket. I said, you have to come back. So we're looking forward to it. It's kind of antsy. I'm not a big fan of flying, but like I said, that's the only way to get there. And I know you guys will be praying for us, and we appreciate it. We're definitely holding you up in prayer and just praying for, God to just anoint Dan like he always does. And he'll have the word for God that you guys need, and I'm 100% sure of that. I just am. If you guys will stand with me tonight, just consider yourselves dismissed. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I would like to see if Tom would be okay if we said a prayer for him while he's here. If anybody would like to gather around and